Okay, so I did not prepare remarks because I figured, as turned out to be the case, that many people would have made the points before me, and therefore I would end up repeating just what's been said. And so, rather than prepared remarks, I want to use this occasion to react to what I've heard, and for pedagogical purposes, I suppose. There's no point in me reiterating where I agree. I'll use this occasion to show, to express where I disagree, but also bearing in mind that doesn't mean there's a large overlap, in my opinion, with what's been said. I'll just focus on where I disagree or where I think I might have something to supplement the remarks that have been made. First of all, on the question of the tactics of the Israel lobby in the UK and as well in the United States, it's important to understand why they've resorted to these kinds of ruthless and transparently undemocratic um, uh, methods of trying to suppress discussion of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And the main reason is it's because Israel lost probably you could say around 2000 in that period, it was clear that Israel had lost the battle for public opinion. Israel was very confident since 1948. They had a very effective propaganda apparatus, and that uh, the apparatus on the other side was weak, it was feeble, and therefore it commanded all public discussion of the Israel-Palestine conflict, or back then it was called the Israel-Arab conflict. And so it was confident that in any public debate, it would easily prevail. And so it was all for democracy, all for public debate, because the balance was on their side. Uh, Beginning in, I would say, if you were to ask me to date it, I would say beginning with the first Lebanon War in June 1982, and then pretty much climaxing with Operation Cast Lead in 2007, 2008, or was it like, yeah, 2008, 2009. Now my memory slipped, but it's either, let's just go 2007, 8. In that period, there was a gradual uh, incremental loss in the persuasiveness of the Israeli case. And after Operation Cast Lead, it was very difficult for Israel to sustain itself in public debate. And so at that point, they decided to take off the kid gloves, to forget about pretenses of democracy, forget about free speech, and just to pretty ruthlessly um, throttle any opponents of Israel in the public domain, and by acting behind the scenes. And so I think it should be borne in mind that the reason Israel resorted to these essentially, you might call it terror tactics, of which one of the panelists mentioned, the reason they resorted to those tactics is because they had lost the battle for public opinion. On the question of what was behind the attack, the anti-Semitism attack on labor, I, I guess I agree with parts, but I disagree with other parts of what's been said. Uh, Originally, the attack on Corbyn, it came from the Jewish establishment in the UK. That's uncontroversial. And I think it's also uncontroversial to say that they were instrumentalizing or weaponizing anti-Semitism in order to stop Jeremy Corbyn and his wing of the Labour Party, which was highly critical of Israel and much more supportive of the Palestinians. But that really can't explain why it became a national hysteria. Mostly these are kinds of intramural battles between the Israel apologists and the left when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict. But it pretty rapidly escalated into a national hysteria against Corbyn and the left for being anti-Semitic. And there, I don't believe it had all that much to do with Israel. The fact was, Corbyn was a much bigger threat, or he posed a much bigger threat than just Israel and the Palestinians. He represented a radical, um, he posed a radical threat to the status quo. And the status quo was not happy about that fact. The status quo included everyone. I followed it fairly closely, and I also had the assistance of Jamie Stern Weiner, Deborah McCovey, who sent me lots and lots and lots of things every day and commentary. Um, it included everyone. It was everyone from the Guardian on one end to the Daily Mirror and Sky News, or I should say, in the Mirror and the tabloids at the other end. It included the whole of the non-print media, BBC, Sky News, everyone. And it wasn't Israel or the attacks in Israel that exercised them. What exercised them to the point of panic at some point was the fear that the Corbyn wing of the party might actually come into power and threaten what was and is a very good life for them. So I think there's an error in judgment to think that it was all about Israel. Actually, I think the Israel aspect initiated the attacks on Corbyn, but it was overshadowed significantly by the time the hysteria had escalated to trying to stop Corbyn, not because of what he represented regarding Israel, and not only what he represented regarding foreign policy, but Corbyn as the exponent of and the social force representing a real challenge to the status quo in the UK. I would also add that there's a kind of irony here because you're watching what ought to be struggles of the left, namely the struggle against anti-Semitism, the struggle against racism, being instrumentalized by the ruling elites in order to stop the left. And you saw a similar phenomenon in the United States, but in a different register. Bernie Sanders' candidacy, it came under assault, not by the forces claiming anti-Semitism, which proved to be pretty marginal. I was wrong on that point. It proved to be pretty marginal in the United States. What was used to dethrone, to stop, in the end successfully, what was used to stop the Bernie Sanders campaign was identity politics. The charges first made against Bernie Sanders was the Bernie Bros claim that he was hostile to women, that it was all white males who supported Bernie Sanders. And then it was claimed that Bernie Sanders had no base, no roots, no support in the African American community. And then, just as in 2016, when Bernie first ran, just as in 2016, one has to be honest about these things. It was the African American community that killed the Bernie Sanders candidacy as the Democratic Party weaponized identity politics. By the way, most significantly in 2020, it was Barack Obama weaponizing the identity politics, which again is roughly a left cause, defending the cause of minorities and persecuted minorities and so forth, weaponizing the identity politics to stop Bernie Sanders in the United States. I want to say just a few brief words because I suppose most people are familiar with my opinion on this topic, so I don't want to belabor it in the time that I have. It's the use of a certain language which I find both imprecise, alienating, and politically sterile, if not counterproductive. The most obvious case is the use of terms like Zionism, which in my opinion, I can claim, let's call it a modest amount of expertise on the topic because I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the theory of Zionism. I think these terms like Zionism don't define anything specific or explicit enough that they communicate a meaningful political message to the broad public. Most people in the broad public don't know what Zionism is, and frankly, couldn't care less what Zionism is if they were asked to. In fact, most Zionists or self-proclaimed Zionists probably don't know much about Zionism. I doubt 1 in 10,000 Zionists, I take that back, 1 in 100,000 Zionists have read Herzl's The Jewish State, even though it's a very tiny volume, runs to like 60 pages. I doubt they've read it. They know none of the foundational works. What Zionism basically means in the current world is belief in the right of Jews to have a state of their own. And underpinning that is our notions of Jewish superiority and Jewish supremacy. That to me is, roughly speaking, don't want to get into details, but roughly speaking, it's become an ideology of Jewish supremacy, and its main political manifestation is the goal of a Jewish state, or to preserve a state for the Jews, even at the expense of non-Jews in that Jewish state. So I think it's much more useful if you want to communicate a message that has resonance in the broad public and doesn't turn them off or turn them indifferent, to specify exactly what we're talking about. Do you believe Jews have the right to a state of their own, which renders non-Jews in that state second-class citizens, and in the ideal situation, would want to see all the non-Jews vanish? Do you believe in that idea? I think if you pose the question in those terms, you're much more likely to first elicit a reaction from a broad public, and most likely the answer is going to be a no. That kind of setup is unacceptable. So I personally think it's much more useful to use precise language when the Bolsheviks in 1917 seized power. They didn't ask the public to take a stand on the theory of surplus value or the communist creed, or from each according to his ability to each according to his need. They put forth a slogan which practical people could understand: bread, peace, and land. And I think we should learn from that, which is you may have your own theoretical convictions, and they may be precious to you, and you may want to hug them. But when you're trying to speak to a broad public, you should use a language that the broad public can understand, comprehend, and hopefully also embrace. I would also say that goes to using terms like anti-Semitism and anti-Semites. So Tony Greenstein, I agree with him on actually quite a lot. But when he says things like, well, if you call Jews killers of Christ, you're an anti-Semite. If you engage in Holocaust denial, you're an anti-Semite. I think Mr. Wadsworth said, if I understood him correctly, and I might be wrong here, but he opposed the publication of David Irving's Diaries of Goebbels because Irving is a Hitler apologist. I think all of that, the labels like anti-Semite, I don't know if Jews killed Christ or not. Frankly, I don't really care all that much. That doesn't keep me up late at night or exercise me when I get up in the morning. But those are sorts of things which should just be debated, disputed, and you come out with your own conclusions. Did the Jews do it or did they not? When Mel Gibson made his film Passion of the Christ, he seemed to have started off by blaming Jewish moneylenders or Jews in the temple for Christ's killing, and then he was forced to change the script. I don't see why anyone should be forced to change anything. Express your point of view. If somebody disagrees with it, let them disagree. I don't see why one has to get so excited about it. In the case of David Irving, well, David Irving was a very good historian. I don't care what Richard Evans says. He was a very good historian. He produced works which are substantive. And I happen to have read the Goebbels diary, his book on Goebbels. He had stolen the plates, which were stolen the plates of the diaries, and then wrote a book on it. I thought the book was frankly mediocre, but it certainly should have been published. I mean, mediocre books, there are about 1,000 mediocre books published each month versus one good book. So if it falls in the category of mediocre, okay, not a big deal. I don't see why one would want to stop publication of it. Doesn't register with me. If you don't like it, don't read it. And they actually, in the case of Irving, he knew a thing or two. Actually, he knew a thing or two or three. He is competent, so far as I can tell. The same thing with this rapper, Mr. Wiley. I had some correspondence this morning and last night with Jamie Sternweiner and with Deborah McCoby, because I asked them to prime me for today. Jamie was kind enough to send me all the tweets. Some of the tweets I agree with Jackie Walker. Some of the tweets were awful, I guess. Some of them were provocative, I suppose you would call it. I mean, some of the tweets, I have to say, one of the tweets, the first one that Jamie sent me was with the pictures of the Bolsheviks who were allegedly responsible for the Bolsheviks and their comrades, who were allegedly responsible for the murder of millions of Christians. And they had a picture of Leo Jogishis. I thought to myself, who even knows who he is? I know who he is. He was Rosa Luxemburg's first lover. And he was the head of the Polish left-wing Communist Party. But nobody even knows who he is. I suspect the only two people here who know are Tarek and Tony. Not exactly the biggest figure, even the pantheon of socialism. Not exactly a big figure. So I don't see what's the reason to get excited. I don't see the reason to get excited about Holocaust deniers. First of all, I don't know what a Holocaust denier is. I don't. Because some people say if you deny that the centrality of the 6 million Jews being killed and you try to bring in other groups of people, you become a Holocaust denier. Other people say if you deny the centrality of the gas chambers, you become a Holocaust denier. So by that standard, strangely enough, and I guess Tarek and Tony will be the only ones to remember, by that standard, Daniel Jonah Goldhagen, the author of Hitler's Willing Executioners, that best-selling schmata, he's a Holocaust denier because he claimed that the core of the Holocaust didn't occur in the gas chambers. He said it was in the killing fields that the essence of the Holocaust occurred. And then the fellow who, his name just slipped my mind, but you can help me with that, who made the 12-hour film Shoah, Lanzmann.
Lanzmann.
Right, so then Lanzmann started to accuse Goldhagen of being a Holocaust denier because Lanzmann focused on the gas chambers. And then the question of the numbers, how many were killed? Well, those are statistical, scholarly questions. Why can't we just answer a number with a number and present our sources? Some African Americans will tell you 100 million Africans perished in the Middle Passage. 100 million Africans perished. I was very surprised when I read Robin Blackburn's History of Slavery. He put the number at 1.2 million. I'm almost certain of that. Now, does that mean that Robin Blackburn is a slave trade denier? Or do we just go through the numbers? We evaluate, assess, any serious scholar does. I don't see the point of becoming hysterical over these issues. You just patiently wade through the evidence. If you don't agree, you explain why you don't agree. I don't believe in censoring any of these people, um, including, I would have to say, I don't agree with censoring the rapper Mr. Wiley. He has the right to say what he wants, and if you don't like it, go somewhere else. Actually, get off of Twitter and maybe crack a book. That might be an exciting adventure for you. Uh, and on a second related matter, I'm much more exercised by Mark Regev appearing so respectfully on British television, justifying the murder of, in the case of Operation Protective Edge, justifying the murder of 550 Palestinian children, justify the murder of, or the destruction of 18,000 Palestinian homes. That really makes me very indignant, very angry. He has the right to do it, but it makes me much angrier than what Mr. Wiley has to say about the Nazi Holocaust. Um, in the same way in the US, Kanye West, he says all sorts of lunatic things every other day. He says slavery wasn't so, Kanye West, of course, is African American, but he says slavery couldn't have been so bad because blacks accepted it for 400 years. And then he said, Harriet Tubman, the great leader of the Underground Railway, he said she didn't really free slaves because she ended up finding them jobs with other white employers. As if, her responsibility was not just to get African Americans out of slavery, but she had a responsibility to give them a lifetime pension. Uh, Rappers say stupid things. Rappers say lunatic things. I mean, I think it's your problem if you look for political wisdom from a rapper. Okay, in my stupid youth, I looked for political wisdom from Jane Fonda and Glenda and and Vanessa Redgrave. Okay, that was dumb. I'll agree, but to get hysterical, to get exercised, I don't see it at all. If you want to get exercised about people who are apologizing in public for crimes that are being committed in real time, not about what somebody has to say about the Nazi Holocaust or about slavery or about the Middle Passage. Maybe it's dumb, maybe it's not dumb, but we can just go through the normal protocol of trying to separate out truth from lies. And the very last thing I'll say is, with all due respect to Chris Williamson, I don't think the strategy is to have a cancel culture of our own. Now, I understood that you were using it in a kind of loose sense, but I think we should do exactly what the point of this forum this afternoon suggested that we do. We should be fighting any assaults on freedom of speech. We should be upholding, as the first woman said, the best part of the left tradition, the tradition in Marx and the tradition in Rosa Luxemburg. And I still resonate to what Rosa Luxemburg wrote in her critique of the Russian Revolution, where she said, we don't have answers. Socialism it's just a very theoretical general idea, and that we need lots of free debate, free discussion as we try to find a path in uncharted waters. There are no answers. And the only way we can find the truth, okay, you may not like the expression because it has the capitalist overtone, the marketplace of ideas, the unfettered, full, fearless exchange of opinions, what Mill called the standing invitation to the world to prove you wrong. Luxemburg puts it in her own language. She doesn't use capitalist metaphors, but the idea is the same, that nobody has monopoly over truth. Everybody is fallible. A minority of even one can possess truth, and that we should allow for the full, free discussion of ideas. And I want to emphasize, because I had a little exchange with Jamie on this point around a week ago, I don't think the reason we want to have a full, fearless discussion of ideas is not just so we won't appear hypocritical, That is to say, we don't denounce others for repressing speech while repressing speech ourselves. It's not a utilitarian calculus. The principle is you can't make any progress in this world in the absence of truth. Otherwise, you're just living in a world of mystifications and shadows. And the only way you can acquire, grasp, reach that truth is by allowing for everybody to speak, that standing invitation to the world to prove you wrong. And that's how we will advance, progress as a movement, and hopefully as a humanity.
Thank you very much.